My name is Lyra. I live in Chicago. Makeup Stories is the best podcast ever. Tell your friends. My name is Elise. I'm 4 years old, and my birthday is May 16th from Minnesota. And I would like a story about a mermaid, a princess castle, and a princess. And the girls who can do spells in the dark.
Tonight's made-up story is a request from a girl named Elise who lives in Minnesota and who turned 5 years old 2 weeks ago on May 16th. And so we want to say, happy birthday, Elise. And Elise asked for us to make up a story that includes a mermaid, a princess castle, and a girl who can do spells in the dark. Once upon a time, a long time ago, there lived a girl whose name was Elise. Elise had an old book that was in the top of a bookshelf, and Elise's mom kept telling Elise, "Don't look at that book, don't look at that book." But it looked like a kid's book, and Elise got more and more curious. So one day she said, "Mom, can I please just go on a ladder and climb up to the top of the bookshelf and get that book?" And Elise's mom said, "Well, I'm really not so sure, because I don't know if you're old enough yet." And Elise said, "Well, I did turn 5 2 weeks ago." And Elise's dad said that she was right, and so it was time she could look at the special book that was in the top of the bookshelf in her house. She reached out with her hand and grabbed the book, and Elise brought the book down the stepladder, being very careful not to fall as she went down. When Elise got to the ground, she said, "All right, Mom, okay, Dad, now I'm going to look through the book." And Elise opened up the book. And when she opened the book, she saw that there were no letters and there were no pictures. Inside the book, it kind of folded out and the book became bigger. You could unfold the book. And it was a treasure map. The book wasn't a kid's book at all. It just looked like it. Really, it was a treasure map with lines on it and squiggles and pictures of gold and mermaids and an island far away. It also looked like there was pictures of Lucky Charms and other kinds of cereal. And if you looked closely, you could also see magic wands, and you can see fairies. There were butterflies, unicorns, and more. There were castles that went upside down. There were even people who were as big as giants, but also looked like babies. And there were so many silly things. Elise asked her mom and dad, "Mom, Dad, did you guys know about this treasure map? And what does it lead to?" And Elise's parents said that last time they looked at that book, it was a regular kid's book. And that every time a new person opens the book shows something new. And for Elise, it was showing a treasure map. Right in middle of the treasure map, there was a red button, and the red button said, "Press me." So Elise told her mom and dad to hold her hand as she pressed the red button on the treasure map that had the pictures of the islands and mermaids and unicorns and fairies and butterflies and donuts and stars and other nice things. And Elise pressed the red button. And suddenly, Elise and her mom saw that outside the window there was a silly-looking helicopter. The silly-looking helicopter, instead of having regular rotors, the propeller kind of things that turn around on top of a helicopter, it had a fork and a knife on top, and they were arranged crisscross applesauce so that when it turned around, the fork and knife would kind of help the helicopter lift off. And instead of it having a regular pole on top, it had a straw, but the straw was made of metal. And the pilot of the helicopter looked like a piggy, but it was a real pilot, and you can tell because it was able to talk. Well, the pilot of the helicopter, the piggy pilot, landed right outside in Elise's backyard and knocked on the door. Elise and her parents opened the door, and the piggy pilot said, "Did somebody press a button on a secret treasure map?" And Elise said that she did. And the piggy pilot told Elise and her parents that they should go in the helicopter ride to get to the treasure, because that's what happens when you press the red button. It makes the piggy helicopter come. Well, Elise and her parents got in the helicopter. They put on their seatbelts, and there was even a car seat in the helicopter. They called it a helicopter seat for kids. And Elise sat in that one, and the piggy pilot said, "Off we go." And he turned on the helicopter engine, and on top of the helicopter, the fork and the knife were turning around, and he said, "Lift off," and the helicopter started going up in the air. Soon Elise could see what her house in Minnesota looked like from the sky. She told her parents that the roof looked silly, and that she could also see the neighbors' houses, and streets that were far away, and a store where they shopped. But the piggy helicopter pilot was taking them to an island on the other side of the world. The helicopter had flash mode, and so it was able to go there in the time it takes me to say viz, 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 viz. And so, in an instant, the piggy helicopter and Elise and her parents were on the other side of the world. Everybody knows about that there's a North Pole on the top of the Earth, and that there's a South Pole on the bottom of the Earth. But what most people don't know is that there's an East Pole on the right of the Earth, and a West Pole on the left of the Earth. And the piggy helicopter pilot took the silly helicopter all the way to the West Pole. The West Pole does not have snow like the North Pole and the South Pole. The West Pole is full of sand. It's a desert. And in the desert of the West Pole, there's a secret part where there's so much rain and the skies are so blue. In this part of the desert, it could rain even if it's blue skies. And when the rain hits you, it doesn't make you wet. It just drops down on your clothes and just goes down by itself. And if you splash in a puddle in this part of the desert, then your shoes don't get wet, but the puddle does splash. So it's so much fun because kids that live in this part of the West Pole with all of the sand in the desert, they get to splash around as many puddles as they want, and they don't have to get their clothes changed or different socks or shoes. Elise loved the West Pole, and she saw that there was a big princess castle there. And under the princess castle was built on top of some glass poles that were so sturdy. And the glass poles looked like they floated in the air. But really they didn't. Really they were held up by so many spider webs. The whole castle was built on top of spider webs. The spider webs were really beautiful because they were rainbow colored. And they went in funny patterns and shapes, like up and down, and back and forth, and side to side, and there to there. And the whole princess castle was so giant that it went all the way into the clouds. And there were big windows and mirrors all over. And there were as many pets as any princess could want. And there were baths that had all the bath toys any kid could ever want. And the princess castle, inside of it, in the special bathtubs, there were little mermaids that were smaller than regular mermaids. And the mermaids could play with kids while they were taking baths. And to make a mermaid appear in your bath, you have to close your eyes and just imagine that it's there for a little bit. And then you can play with it. Well, Elise and her family used to love exploring the castle in the sand of the West Pole. And then in the castle, there was a prince. And the prince came up to Elise. And the prince looked like he was wearing a very, very silly costume. because the prince's costume, the prince was dressed up as a monkey. So he was a person, but he was wearing a silly monkey costume, and he was a prince. And the monkey costume prince told Elise that she could make any magic true in this special castle on the West Pole as long as she waved her hands and said magic, magic, and it was dark. And so Elise cast spells on everybody who lived in the special castle in the sand of the West Pole, and she told all of them that when they wake up, they should come visit her in Minnesota. And then Elise and her family went back in the special helicopter with the piggy pilot, and Elise got in the helicopter car seat, and they went all the way back home. And Elise and her family lived happily ever after. The end.